Hi everyone, this is Bridget from empowermefirst.college. In this lesson, you learn about the difference between fiction and non-fiction. This goes beyond verbal text, and before we start, please discuss with your partners how you define the following terms and look them up in online dictionaries. Only after you've written down your own definitions, turn to the next page. The terms we are looking at is fiction, non-fiction, literature or literary work, explicit, implicit, art, fact, popular art, kitsch. Now pause the video to do the task. Now let me give you a definition of the terms mentioned. You will also find the definition in the next task. Here, let me start with fiction. Fiction usually refers to a literary work based on imagination. It's not presented as a fact, but it can be based on a true story, historical event, situation, on real people or places in real settings. A fictional text can include many facts, for example, if you read an autobiography or a historical novel. Fiction can also refer to oral recounts of a situation or event that is not factual. For example, if a boy has caught a small fish and he exaggerates and tells everyone that he has caught a fish bigger than himself. Typical genres of fictional texts are novels, short stories, novella, but it can also refer to fairy tales, plays, films, poetry. It derives from the Latin fictio, the act of making, fashioning, or molding. In that sense, fiction can be any type of art in which we create a story, we create a situation, or anything that we can imagine. Non-fiction refers to texts that are based on reality. Their objectives are to inform rather than tell a story. Examples for non-fictional texts are newspaper articles, reports, or your school books. Readers depend on the accuracy and truthfulness of the account given. The reader is not interested in long descriptions of the atmosphere in a place or in what the people think. They are interested in facts, how they are connected and what relevance they have to their realities. Literature usually refers to a fictional text, mostly written as an artistic work, but it can also be orally recorded. It involves prose, poetry, and plays. Literature is distinguished from commercial literature and kitsch by telling stories implicitly, by its structure, style, and character building. In some cases, it can also refer to an academic study on a specific field. Example, scientific literature. Explicit means everything is said directly and there's no room for interpretation. Implicit means things are said indirectly. The reader needs to use his mind to interpret the story. For example, if a character leaves his family, we learn through his thoughts or the way he speaks to them what motivates him. Fact and non-fiction are closely related. Fact is something that truly exists, happens, a true piece of information. There is proof for it to exist. For example, if we look at Newton's law of gravity, we can observe it whenever a mango falls from a tree. Now we look at different types of art. Art usually refers to objects, images, music, or texts created by artists in an imaginative and aesthetic way. for example, paintings, sculptures, songs, or plays. While in classical art, the craftsmanship and beauty were in the center of attention, in recent decades the focus was also shifted to the function of art as allowing a paradigm shift, provoking the audience into reflection on the world around them. Paradigm shift means that people start looking at something differently thanks to a piece of art. Current issues became focus points of artistic works. There was another paradigm shift towards the end of the 19th century, provoked by the invention of photography, to move away from accuracy to creating specific style that was signature to the artist and to show the subjectivity of perception. Pop art is a specific stream of art that merges popular and commercial art that borders to kitsch, but with its very recognizable and unique style stands out. The most famous representative of this movement was Andy Warhol, but besides that, you might also think of graphic novels. Kitsch. Kitsch may use the form of art, such as novels or paintings, but it can be recognized by being very explicit, by undeveloped, typified characters. An example is the romantic novel, in which the most beautiful princess will get the most handsome and successful warrior, but we learn nothing about their personalities. Now let me give you a definition of the terms mentioned. You will also find the definition in the next task. Here, let me start with fiction. Fiction usually refers to a literary work based on imagination. It's not presented as a fact, but it can be based on a true story, historical event, situation, on real people or places in real settings. A fictional text can include many facts, for example, if you read an autobiography or a historical novel. Fiction can also refer to oral recounts of a situation or event that is not factual. For example, if a boy has caught a small fish and he exaggerates and tells everyone that he has caught a fish bigger than himself. Typical genres of fictional texts are novels, short stories, novella, but it can also refer to fairy tales, plays, films, poetry. It derives from the Latin fictio, the act of making, fashioning, or molding. In that sense, fiction can be any type of art in which we create a story, we create a situation, or anything that we can imagine. Now let's practice. You have learned these terms, discuss these questions. What is the difference between fictional and factual texts? What is art? What is a literary work? Pause this video and discuss your answer. Let's have a short explanation. On one hand, we have facts. These facts can be expressed in different ways. Charts, tables, numbers, pictures, words. The form is clear. There should not be any ambiguous wording. No opinions or personal views should be shown. Factual texts are non-fictional. They are real and explicit. On the other hand, you have art, literature, fiction. They show you a change of perspective. They make you imaginative. And what they tell you is implicit. they tell stories, they create atmosphere, they take you in a different world of imagination. For simplicity's sake, we use the opposites fiction and fact. We know that these terms may not always be accurate, but they will allow us to understand the greater differences. Let's just summarize again. A text is any kind of work. Mostly we think about verbal texts, but pictures, movies, audio are also considered texts. Fictional means anything imaginative. It can have factual elements, but it always takes a personal and subjective viewpoint, and its expression is implicit. Factual texts refer to texts that do not leave room for interpretation. They present you with information. Remember, when we speak about text, we don't always only mean verbal forms of expression. Texts simply mean weaving or creating a fabric from different pieces of information and material, so they can also be visual and audio. When we refer to art, we mean any piece of work, be it paintings, sculptures, music, or literature. What they have in common are the originality of thought and style, the creativity of the artist or writer, and the change in perspective to an individual, unusual viewpoint that allows the audience to do a paradigm shift, meaning a shift in perspective and viewpoint. This also allows us to analyze and interpret the piece of art. If someone copies existing pieces of art or doesn't choose an unusual point of view, this would be considered plagiarism, which means a breach of copyright. If there's no originality in style, everything is expressive, this points to crafts. If in addition it's exaggerated, this would be considered kitsch. Now look at this photo of a sculpture. Discuss and decide if it's fiction or fact. Pause the video until you finish discussing it. This sculpture would be considered art and fictional. Why? Yes, you see a person, a portrait of a man, but it's very expressive and the style is very distinct. One can recognize Giacometti's work by its expression, atmosphere, the long face, the way he uses his fingers to give it a rough texture. It is very unique. His sculptures and drawings create a special atmosphere, and they have a strong effect from afar as he focuses on gesture and expression. You can take time for interpretation. You can imagine a story about this man. This makes his work art and also fictional, in the sense that even though the artist used a real person as a model, he put so much of his own personal style and creativity into it that this person may be recognized by his expression, but not necessarily by his looks. So the story is told implicitly. Now look at this photo of a man. Discuss and decide if it's fiction or fact. Pause the video until you finish discussing it. This photo is factual. We recognize the man, Barack Obama. The perspective is direct, explicit. There is a reduction of the rest of the picture. Yes, we see only a part of a flag, but we don't see what is happening around him. But this reduction is not there to give us room for interpretation, but to make us focus on a person. He is in the center and we focus on one aspect, his friendly and positive personality. Now look at this picture, discuss and decide if it's fiction or fact. Pause the video until you finish discussing it. Of course, these pictures show a real person, Marilyn Monroe. We recognize her. We might even recognize the photo that was used as a basis for it. There are not many elements we could call fictional, and there is not much room for interpretation. Still, the strong colors give it a distancing effect. The exaggeration is pushing it to the verge of kitsch. This is also why it is considered art. The style is very distinct and the reduction to strong prime colors together with the overstatement make it unique. This is why it has become an iconic piece of art, even the most famous representation of an art genre called pop art. One could even claim it poses a number of questions such as why did he duplicate the picture and represent it in different colors? Why did he choose this specific person? Now, look at this photo, discuss and decide if it's fiction or fact. Pause the video until you finish discussing it. This is an interesting picture as it is certainly close to just a factional photo taken of a girl. Yes, it is the photo of a real person. The reduction is striking and the focus on her expression. This leaves a lot of room for interpretation and tells a story. Our imagination is drawn into the picture. What is she thinking, feeling? What happened to her? So many great literary works base their stories on facts, for instance, historic novels. They are different, though, from biographies, where the author tries to tell someone's story as factual as possible. Literary works that base their stories on real people or historic events still create fiction by change of perspective, atmosphere, giving the person a voice. Now look at more examples and how we can read pictures and texts and how we can distinguish fiction from fact.